Tell us again what happened." The recorder clicks on. The room hums. The au pair looks down at her hands, then up at the detectives. I just put him down, maybe a little hard. Then I jiggled him to wake him up. Medical scans say violence. She says an accident. The difference is not a detail. It's the whole story. And in this room, that story must hold against timestamps, tear tracks, and the physics of infant trauma. When a caregiver becomes the only witness, truth lives or dies on language. Listen carefully. You'll hear it struggle. This is the Louise Woodward interrogation. It was 1997 in Newton, Massachusetts, a wealthy suburb just outside of Boston. On tree-lined streets and manicured lawns, the Eappen family lived a life many envied. Sunil and Deborah were both doctors, hardworking and respected in their fields. Their home was filled not only with success but with laughter from their two boys, Brendan, just 2 years old, and Matthew, the baby, only 8 months old. For parents with careers demanding long hours, there was a practical reality. They needed help. That help came in the form of an au pair, an arrangement common among professional families. An au pair would live in the home, provide childcare, and in return receive room, board, and a cultural experience. The Eappens found their au pair through a reputable agency. Her name was Louise Woodward. She was just 18, from Elton, England. Bright, eager, and adventurous, she embodied the spirit of a teenager seeking independence abroad. To the Eappens, she was a good fit, young, energetic, capable of handling 2 children. For weeks, life settled into routine. Louise bonded with the children, learning the rhythms of feedings, naps, and playtime. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Louise often felt overwhelmed. She complained to friends about the long hours, about being treated as more of a servant than an equal participant in cultural exchange. Her frustrations sometimes surfaced in conflicts with Deborah, who expected precision and attentiveness in caring for her children. Still, the arrangement continued until February 4th, 1997. On that cold February evening, Louise was alone with Matthew. Sometime after 9 p.m., she placed a frantic call to 911. Her voice carried a hint of panic, though not the raw hysteria one might expect. "The baby's not breathing," she cried. "Please, hurry." Paramedics rushed to the scene. Matthew lay limp and unresponsive, his skin pale, his breathing shallow. They performed CPR as they carried him to the ambulance. Every second mattered. At Boston's Children's Hospital, doctors worked desperately. They ran scans, checked vitals, inserted tubes. But what the monitors revealed was grim. Matthew had massive brain swelling. His skull bore a fracture. His retinas showed hemorrhages. Doctors recognized the pattern instantly. Shaken baby syndrome. To them, this wasn't a mystery. This was trauma. Not a stumble, not a sudden illness, but force. Matthew never regained consciousness. On February 9th, 5 days after being rushed to the hospital, the Eappens made the decision no parent should ever face. They removed life support. Their son was gone. When tragedy strikes a child, the circle of suspicion narrows quickly. Who was with Matthew? Who had last touched him, fed him, held him? That night, the answer was Louise Woodward. Detectives questioned her immediately. At first, she claimed nothing unusual had happened. Matthew had gone limp. She called for help right away. But when pressed, her story began to shift. She admitted she may have put him down on the bed, a little harder than usual. She used the word popped. Later still, she said she had jiggled him when he went limp, an attempt, she explained, to revive him. These words stood out. Popped, jiggled. Harmless-sounding verbs, but the scans on the monitor screamed otherwise. To investigators, this wasn't just a story changing under pressure. It was minimization. A softening of actions too brutal to accept, wrapped in words too small for the evidence before them. By the next day, Louise Woodward was under arrest, initially charged with assault and battery. After Matthew's death, the charge escalated to second-degree murder. The tapes from Louise's interrogation are unsettling, not because of anger or aggression, but because of their contradictions. Louise sits small in the room, not defiant, not hostile, but not shattered either. Her voice is uneven. At times it breaks with nerves. At other times it steadies, as if she is trying to regain control of the story. She insists she did not harm Matthew intentionally. She repeats over and over, "I must have done something wrong, but I didn't mean it." Psychologists who analyze interrogations call this partial admission. It is the middle ground between guilt and denial, a way of acknowledging involvement without carrying the unbearable weight of intent. The detectives press her. Why didn't her story match the medical evidence? Why did her words downplay what doctors were calling catastrophic trauma? Louise folds under pressure. She admits in increments, but each admission is wrapped in minimization. She never says she shook him violently. She never says she lost her temper. Instead, she offers fragments: a bump, a jiggle, a mistake. What was happening in Louise's mind? At 18, she was legally an adult, but developmentally still very much a teenager. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls judgment, impulse, and long-term consequences, doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s. Placed in a foreign country, entrusted with children, under pressure, Louise was in over her head. When Matthew collapsed, her brain likely entered panic mode. Denial became her shield. Denial isn't always outright lying, it can be selective. It can twist words into softer shapes. I didn't slam him, I popped him. I didn't shake him, I jiggled him. This is how the mind protects itself. By reframing trauma in gentler terms, Louise could cling to a version of herself that wasn't a killer. But to detectives, and later to the public, those softened words looked like deception. One of the most disturbing aspects of Louise's interrogation was her affect. She was nervous, yes, but she wasn't devastated. She wasn't inconsolable. She answered questions, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes clearly, but rarely with raw emotion. Viewers of the tapes described her as off, not overtly cold, but misaligned, detached. Was this guilt, or was it shock? Some psychologists argue it was the latter, a teenager so emotionally overwhelmed that her mind shut down to protect itself. Others saw it as a chilling sign of detachment. Either way, the impression was powerful. The case went to trial in October 1997. The courtroom was packed. Cameras rolled. The story splashed across front pages in both the US and the UK. Prosecutors argued that Louise, frustrated with her duties, lost her temper. In a fit of rage, she shook and struck Matthew, causing fatal injuries. They leaned heavily on medical testimony. The skull fracture, the hemorrhages, the swelling. Injuries too severe, they said, to come from anything but violence. The defense countered with a different narrative. They suggested Matthew's injuries may have been older, perhaps from a fall weeks earlier. They argued that Louise may have been careless, but she was not a murderer. The jury deliberated for 26 hours. On October 30th, 1997, they returned their verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Louise Woodward, just 19 years old, was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. But the story didn't end there. Just days later, Judge Hiller Zobel made a shocking ruling. He reduced the conviction to involuntary manslaughter. His reasoning? He believed Louise had acted recklessly but without malice. Her new sentence, time served, 278 days. Louise walked free. The decision outraged the Eappen family. To them, it minimized Matthew's death. Their baby's life, they believed, had been reduced to a legal technicality. In the UK, however, crowds cheered. Louise returned home to a hero's welcome by some who saw her as a victim of American overreach. The divide was stark. Amid the storm, one truth remained. Matthew was the actual victim. 8 months old, too small to crawl or speak, too helpless to defend himself. In victim psychology, infants represent ultimate vulnerability. Every cry, every need, every ounce of survival depends on adults. Matthew had no agency, no voice, no choice. His safety was an act of trust, his parents' trust in Louise. That trust was shattered. For the Eappens, grief was poisoned by guilt. They had hired Louise, they had trusted her, and now their son was gone. This is known as ambiguous trauma. Not just the pain of loss, but the pain of betrayal, when the person entrusted with protection becomes the source of harm. The Louise Woodward case became more than a trial. It became a mirror for society. In America, she was often cast as a dangerous nanny, proof of the risks of entrusting children to strangers. In the UK, she was seen as a scapegoat, an inexperienced teenager destroyed by an unforgiving system. This cultural divide showed how truth is filtered through perspective. The same facts, the same interrogation, two radically different interpretations. The case also fueled debates about shaken baby syndrome. Could such injuries only come from shaking? Or could other causes mimic the signs? Even today, science is debated, but for the Eappens there was no debate. Their son had been fine. In Louise's care, he died. Louise Woodward's interrogation remains haunting because it is a study in contradiction. She was cooperative yet evasive, nervous yet oddly calm. She admitted guilt, but only in softened words. Was this the behavior of a guilty killer, or of a terrified teenager in over her head? That question has never been fully answered. In the end, Matthew Eappen is gone. The Eappens live with their grief. Louise Woodward lives with the shadow of a case that defined her life. The interrogation remains, a record of denial, minimization, and fragile youth colliding with catastrophic responsibility. Because sometimes evil does not roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears the face of a teenager, smiling politely, until trust collapses and a baby's life is gone. In the daycare of horrors, the scariest thing wasn't the monster we could see. It was the ordinary caregiver, speaking in small words, trying to soften a story that could never be softened.